I'll be speaking with Attorney Amy Greer, whose firm is based in New York City. She's one of the lawyers representing Mahmoud Khalil, a U.S. legal permanent resident who was abducted in March from his home in New York City by federal agents and taken 1,000 miles away to a jail in Louisiana. President Trump, no less, said that Khalil would be deported, the first of many supporters of Palestinian rights. Yet after 100 days, Khalil was released on bail yesterday, June 20th, and is being reunited with his family. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
First, I want to congratulate you and the other lawyers who've had success so far facing the might of Trump's Justice Department.
Thank you. Yeah, it's taken a team of over 50 people, but we got there.
Has Khalil gone back to his family now in New York?
He was en route the last I checked and may have landed by now. And I'm really hopeful that he's with Noor and Dean and holding that little baby. So it was imminent when I last checked.
So let's let's talk about this question of bail. So he was released on bail, but the media reports that the government is trying to appeal that release. Is that right?
Yes, we believe that we have every reason to believe that they will, if they haven't already. It's obviously been a flurry in the last 24 hours, but yes, we anticipate that they will challenge it. And we were surprised yesterday that the federal court stepped in and issued bail. But obviously, this is one step towards rectifying, if that's even possible, the injustice that has happened to not just Mahmoud, but to Noor and Dean as well.
So if the government is successful, they'll stick him back in that jail in Louisiana.
Actually, there's some procedural things that, the Third Circuit could actually decide to let him stay out while they determine the issues of the case. They could deny the appeal and say that Judge Farbiarge made a good decision, and adhere to that decision. So it doesn't have to be doom and gloom, even if the government does appeal. And certainly, we hope that the Third Circuit agrees with the opinion that Judge Farbiarge so carefully laid out yesterday in his oral opinion, particularly in his findings that Mahmoud is not a flight risk. He has an American citizen wife and an infant child that he has lost so much precious time with already, and that he's not a danger. And if anything, he's a peace builder and a bridge builder. So we hope that even if the government appeals, the Third Circuit will agree with Judge Farbiage's decision.
All right, so let's look at that decision. As I understand it, the judge decided against the claim of the Secretary of State that he could just deem Khalil as harming U.S. foreign policy and then could be thrown out of the country. Is that right?
Yes, Judge Farbiage, over a couple of opinions as he worked his way up to his ruling. I believe it was last Friday. Time gets away from us, but I think it was a week ago now. So over the course of a couple of opinions, what Judge Farbiage has found is that Marco Rubio, his determination and the use of the way that he made this determination is vague under the Constitution. It's unconstitutionally vague. And part of these findings is, even obviously, I do not believe, and I have never seen that Mahmoud has engaged in anti-Semitism, but the Rubio determination made conclusory allegations that Mahmoud had, is anti-Semitic, and because of the United States investment in fighting anti-Semitism worldwide, that Mahmoud's presence in the United States was adverse to the foreign policy or to the, to the United States efforts to fight anti-Semitism. And what Judge Farbiarge held is in over numerous pages, looked really carefully at what foreign policy is, what it means, and the ways in which anti-Semitism do or do not play into a foreign policy position, and ultimately decided that the determination that Mahmoud the conclusory and incorrect determination that Mahmoud is an anti-Semite is not a foreign policy issue, and therefore Mahmoud's presence in the United States is not adverse or can't be adverse to American foreign policy. And I will just add that in a prior decision, I think it was 2 or 3 decisions ago now, in another long decision, Judge Farbiage also noted that Mahmoud had been engaged in protected political speech. And even if people are offended by that speech, even if they don't agree with that speech, it is speech protected under the United States Constitution. And so the combination of all of these findings, the vagaries of the application of the policy, the adverse foreign policy, statute that Rubio used, and the fact that Mahmoud has been engaged in protected political speech, in mixed in with a bunch of procedural jurisdictional things and all of these kinds of things, Judge Farbiage found that that it is likely we would be successful in the federal habeas petition on that argument, and therefore he granted our preliminary injunction, in part, which included a request for release. However, he did not end up issuing release through the preliminary injunction. He instead entertained a separate bail motion, which is what was heard yesterday from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, and where he ultimately found that Mahmoud is not a danger, not a flight risk, and is experiencing extraordinary circumstances in that his First Amendment rights are being severely restricted.
I'll get into that in a second, but I want to go on to that second government argument, the claim that Khalil hadn't filled out his green card application absolutely correctly. What did the judge say about that?
So the federal district court judge, who is not ruling on that issue, what he did say yesterday in his opinion on bail is that it is extremely rare that the ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, would hold a lawful permanent resident with connections to his community and no criminal record in an ICE detention facility on such a charge. And so he determined, he also made some statements about due process, and also that there's at least a possibility that detaining him on that charge, given how rare it is, could be perceived as retaliatory in nature for his speech, for Mahmoud's speech.
Maybe that's tied into my next question, because there was a sentence I couldn't understand. In his ruling, Judge Fabriars said that there is a due process violative effort to punish Khalil. What does that mean?
I'm not sure what Judge Fabriars meant by that exactly, but what I can say is that the immigration court has just summarily worked through all of these cases, all of these allegations, and Mahmoud is ultimately, not going to receive full due process rights like he would in a federal district court through the immigration process. And I think part of what he's saying is that the ICE and Department of Homeland Security entities will detain him without any real opportunity for review. Like nobody's going to really give any bond hearing on the immigration side. It's due process, and so he and therefore it can be used to retaliate against and punish Mahmoud for his speech, and he won't have any real opportunity to challenge that. And so the district court was offering yesterday through bail an opportunity for him to have due process, be found not dangerous, be found to have community ties, and therefore he can be free. And that is what due process looks like.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, there's many more legal cases going on with Khalil. that people are taking measures against him and he has to defend it in court and so on. Could you briefly tell us about those?
Sure. I'll start on the defensive and then go into the offensive side. There's been a pretty profound effort in the country, all around the country, and this is not new, to deploy lawfare. And what that is it's to find ways to use the civil system, the civil legal system, to bring tort claims, claims that people are inflicting emotional distress, claims that people are violating different statutes by their advocacy, trying to tie the advocacy to terrorism, trying to tie the advocacy to some sort of violence or even just speaking about Palestinian human rights, causing people, intentional infliction of emotional distress and things like that. And this is called lawfare because what happens is when people get sued, they have to fight. You can't just not show up. And so what's happening now is a lot of students who are advocating for Palestinian rights and dignity, including Mahmoud, and many other students around the country, they are being sued for various and sundry things that, to be completely honest, I don't believe that they're stating any kind of a valid claim, but nonetheless, it takes my time, it takes Mahmoud's time, it takes everybody's effort. And so right now there are two cases against Mahmoud in New York, one in the Southern District on the federal side and one in the New York State Court that basically make cast aspersions that do not amount to any kind of legal claim against Mahmoud. And then on the offensive side, I had been working at Columbia with students for quite some time before Mahmoud was abducted, which is how I know him. And Mahmoud and a number of other students have brought a lawsuit against Columbia, the Committee on Education and Workforce, and a number of the agencies that make up the Anti-Semitism Task Force. And we're making what's called a jawbone argument, which is basically the government, who is proscribed by the First Amendment from suppressing and chilling our speech and our expressive activities, is using Columbia to do it instead. They're indirectly suppressing the student movement and speech on Palestine through weaponizing Columbia by stripping their funding and otherwise coercing them to punish students. And as a result, students' First Amendment rights are being violated. And so that's another lawsuit that we have in the Southern District of New York.
Well, that gets me into my question about Columbia and its administration. He was a student at Columbia University. Did the administration stand by their student and help him defend his rights?
No. And this is the thing that has been just very distressing for any and all of us who are associated with Columbia in any way, whether it be, working with students there or, alums that I've spoken to, professors, students. Mahmoud had dreamed of going to Columbia and getting his master's degree there. This was a dream come true. And then once he got there, the genocide in Gaza began, and Mahmoud lifted his voice as a Palestinian, to end the genocide and to end Columbia's participation in the genocide through various financial and academic things. And the school has not done anything to support Mahmoud. They, in Rumeysa Ozturk's case, Tufts submitted a number of declarations in support of their student. But as far as I'm aware, I can only truly speak for Mahmoud, where Columbia has done nothing. But I believe it is also true that they have not supported other students either. And it's extremely disappointing given his role on campus as a trusted negotiator and mediator, somebody known to the campus to be a peaceful advocate, that the school has really abdicated its duty, I think, to protect its students and in particular Mahmoud.
Now, there's been protests against the attempt to deport Khalil all around the world. Do you think the protests have helped influence the courts or at least restrain the administration in some way?
I don't, as I'll start with the administration first. I don't know that this administration is moved by things like that, but I will say that I think for many in the administration, they thought that the abduction and removal of Mahmoud from the United States would be a popular decision. And I think they've learned the opposite. I mean, they even have libertarians and others, speaking out at least against what's happening for Mahmoud, not necessarily in support of Mahmoud, but against what's happening, including Ann Coulter, by the way. And so when you think about it, I do think that the administration is realizing that that this is not a popular decision. Whether it's changing how they do anything, I'm not sure. And as to the court, I mean, the court shouldn't be influenced by that. One would hope that he remains, a neutral, so to speak, and when things appear to be in violation of the Constitution or of any other rights, that he will call it out as such. But I do think that one thing that may, I don't want to speak for Judge Farbiage, but may make a difference is so many different people around the country recognize what an advocate Mahmoud is and a peacemaker, a bridge builder. And one would hope that that maybe, at least even if it's like subliminal or something, made it into Judge Farbiage's assessment that not just that he's not a danger to the community, but that he's an asset to the community. And I would hope that the protests and rallies that have happened at least demonstrate, the human side of what an incredible asset and contribution Mahmoud makes to his community.
So my final question, he's on bail, but obviously the Trump administration is still going after him. He hasn't been accused of a crime, so what are what are they trying to say now? What are their what is the legal excuse for getting him out of the country?
I mean, I think we're yet to see how Judge Farbiage's finding that the Rubio determination is ultimately unconstitutional as applied to Mahmoud, how that impacts the immigration system, which is a separate system entirely. I mean, I think that DHS would have to withdraw that allegation, but we're still figuring out the interplay here. However, the administration and the Department of Homeland Security has this misrepresentation allegation that you mentioned earlier about not filling out the green card application properly. And, I don't want to invite this in any way, but certainly they could decide to bring other allegations as well. I'm not sure what it would be, but, and so we definitely have to watch with concern what happens on the immigration side and in the immigration process. I will say for those who are worried about Mahmoud, Judge Farbiage right now has a standing order that Mahmoud may not be deported unless and until Farbiage has made his determinations. And that's not just for bail, but for the whole habeas case. So at least for now, even if the immigration court and the appeal and all of that, even if they issue a final order of removal for Mahmoud, the Judge Farbiage does still have that order standing. So he cannot be removed from the country until the federal district court rules.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me and explaining all the intricacies of this case. And
You're
thank
very
you so much for
welcome.
your work.
Yes, well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, and I just want to uplift Mahmoud and his family, but also the amazing people around our country who are lifting their voices for their communities, their neighbors, their friends. And I think Mahmoud would want me to say here that though he is out, thousands of other people are still detained in these facilities, and that has to change. And so hopefully your listeners will join Mahmoud in speaking up and speaking out about immigration and detention and for Palestine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.